Alright, in this video, we're going to cover all of the troops and the elites for the Ork army. Now for troops, there's only two options, but for elites, Ork armies have quite a few options, so we're going to go over those. This video, I'm going to go in a little more depth. Last video, I was trying to make it a little more condensed, but I think there's value in making it more in depth, especially for the newer players. And when I was trying to constrain it for time, I felt that I was rushing, so I actually missed a couple of details. This time I prepared a little bit more research. I'm gonna try to go over all of the rankings and even give a little short description on the strategies for the certain units as well. So the rating system is actually based on the units in relation to one another. Also the meta at the time, which is very Drukhari dominant, which a lot of players are adapting to. It's also going to be based on points, not the power levels. The ratings are all going to be based on my personal experience as well as research. If there's a unit that I've not personally tried myself, I will mention it during the rating process. And I also want to give a shout out to everybody on the Warhammer competitive Reddit who actually gave me feedback on my last video, as well as everybody who left a comment on my last video as well and gave me feedback there, as well as all my subscribers. I really appreciate you guys subscribing, and I hope you find value in this video. I really do appreciate all the feedback you guys give me, so definitely leave feedback. It's great to share tips and tricks within the community, especially as 40k players and especially as orc players, as this army is right around the mid tier and it hasn't seen it recently. It's seen actually some success, but we definitely want to see some orc players take first place finishes. So if you have some tips and tricks or comments, definitely leave it below. So without further ado, we're gonna go straight into the classic unit, which is the boys. Okay, so of course the orcs are nothing without the boys, and I rate the boys in between a S and A tier. For this review, we're gonna put it in S tier. Now the reason why I put it in between the S and the A tier is in terms of the orc army, it's an S tier unit. There's nothing really that can match the power of the boys. All the stratagems that they can take, just the fact that they're so cheap, you can bring them in a big squad. Now, the reason why I considered putting it in A tier is that in relation to all of the other units, especially the new units in the 9th edition codex, I'm looking at you, Drukhari, it makes it feel like the orc boys are a little overcosted. So that's the reason that I'm putting it in S tier, because in relation to the orc army, they're great. In relation to the other stuff, they're not so hot. Now, good thing about boys is they're decently priced. They're only 8 points a unit, so for a squad of 10, you're only paying about 80 points for all of the boys. They have good melee profile, so they have a weapon skill of 3, which is pretty damn good, and they have 4 strength, which is pretty big right now. As 4 strength, a lot of the units that players are taking are around 3 strength, so 4 strength you're gonna be wounding on 3 plus. Where they kind of fall apart is that orc boys, they're very squishy. They're a really glass cannon unit. Right now in the meta, we're seeing a lot of people actually reverting back to running 30 squads of boys. If I had to guess why, it's probably because we were using a lot of buggies before in vehicles, but more and more armies have high damage, high armor penetration units. So in that case, they're really adept at taking out vehicles. Like Sisters run a lot of multi-meltas. Drukhari have the Dark Lances on all of their raiders. So it's doing a lot of damage to all of these vehicles that people are running, or even high wound units. So I think that's why we're seeing a return of a lot more volume of boys. I think a lot of people were discouraged with the new blast rules, but I think a lot of players are finding out that just because people are rolling 6 attacks on you doesn't mean that they're all hitting, doesn't mean they're all wounding. So the blast rule is not really that scary, as well as the new morale rule is not that bad, especially with boys having the rule where they can use the number of models in the unit for leadership as opposed to using their actual leadership value. That really makes the leadership test easier to deal with. Now, a couple of tips and tricks that I've written down here. For the newer players who don't know this, you should always take Tankbusta bombs, because every 10 you get one free Tankbusta bomb, and there's no reason not to take it because it's totally free. So always take a Tankbusta bomb. A Nob is free, so always replace one of your boys with a Nob. That's a must because the Nob has an additional strength. I believe it also has one additional leadership. Right now, most of the competitive lists are running Sluggas and the Choppas. You're not really seeing much Shooters. I think that's because people are not running the shooty Bad Moons list that we used to see in 8th edition. So Sluggas and Choppas have become the standard. Choppas giving it an extra attack, so now your boys are coming in at 3 attacks each, which is pretty good. 3 attacks each is pretty good. This is something that I like to do because I don't feel like the Nobz kill saw is that reliable against chaff units, like low toughness units. The kill saw should really be reserved more for the vehicles or when you're hitting things like Terminators. So I personally really like to take my Nob with one Choppa and one kill saw. That way I'm flexible in what it's hitting. Since kill saws and power claws also have -1 to wound. And that could be kind of big because you're increasing your chance to hit by 16%. Another thing to note is that most commonly players when they upgrade the Nob, they prefer to take the kill saw over the power claw. The benefit of the kill saw is you get another point of armor penetration. The other thing that's better about the kill saw is that flat 2 damage. You might be thinking, well, D3 I have a chance of getting 3. With variance in play, I think that having flat 2 damage and D3 damage is not a big difference because D3 damage averages out to 2 damage anyways, so why not just take the non-variance of just dealing 2 damage? So that's why we see most lists taking the kill saws. Good stratagems to use on the boys are obviously Unstoppable Green Tide. So whenever your squad of boys goes below half of the starting units, so let's say you had a unit of 30 and they get shot down to 10 boys, you can replace the entire unit back to 30 boys and deploy it within 14 inches of any battlefield edge and 9 away from the enemy. So this is kind of like a combination of bringing your boys back and also the jumping, which is pretty damn big. With the boards being a lot smaller now too, 14 inches from the battlefield edge is a lot of space, so you can plop the boys down. Another stratagem is get stuck in, lads. Sometimes that extra fight phase with those boys can be the difference between you capturing an objective, because you could wipe out a unit that's very close to the objective and then consolidate onto the objective, denying your opponent. Since boys have objectives secured, so let's say they're holding the points with some kind of elite unit that's not a troop, then you can fight again if you couldn't clear a unit that was close to the objective and then consolidate closer to the objective. So get stuck in, lads, I really like as well. Another great stratagem is if you're running Goths, definitely the Scar Boys is big, because giving that +1 strength, going from 4 strength to 5 strength is pretty big in this current meta, because that lets you basically go from wounding on 6s on strength 8 units to wounding on 5s, which is a 16% increase to wound, which can be really big given that you're going to have a large volume of attacks with your boys. And the other benefit is that there are some units and vehicles even where you'll be now wounding on a 4+ instead of wounding on a 5+, which is another 15% increase. So overall, I really like Scar Boys, and I've been experimenting more with Scar Boys as well. For those reasons, boys are a solid S tier unit. Moving on to the Gretchin. Oh man, Gretchins, man. I really have a hate-love relationship with Gretchins. I would put them between A and B. I put them as A because they're the cheapest way to get troop choices. So you can just take a squad of them so that you can have an easy patrol detachment. When you compare to any other unit that costs 5 points a unit, like Poxbringers, Plague Bearers, they would be a B, because Guardsmen, because Gretchin are just crap, okay, when it comes to any form of combat. They don't do anything, they die to everything. They have horrible leadership, strength 2, toughness 2, they're gonna die to anything. Usually, if someone gets shots off on your Gretchens, you're gonna lose like 5 to 6. You're gonna lose a whole squad. So, for that reason, uh, when you compare it to other armies, I would say Gretchens are a B. But due to the fact that they're so crucial for list building in Ork armies, I put it as an A because they're the cheapest troop choice that we have. So you can use it to get that extra patrol detachment, so that you could give, let's say, your mech guns grot mobs cult, so that now they get to reroll ones and everybody gets a 6+ invulnerable save if they're Gretchens. Honestly, it's times like these where I miss 8th edition because I would love to have 3-point Gretchens back. Games Workshop definitely has to do something in the next codex to bring Gretchens up to speed, because at 5 points a model, they're severely lacking when compared to other units. Like, they just don't do anything. Like, I would way rather have 10 Poxbringers for 50 points than having Gretchens. Another thing too is that they don't get clan cultures and they don't get stratagems. You know, those people who are trying to make a fluffy Gretchen army, and trust me, I've tried to do a lot of stuff like that. I love Gretchens, I like their fluff, but man, the fact that they don't get clan cultures and they can't use stratagems, it's just a big blow to Gretchens. Like, you're basically handicapping yourself if you're trying to build a Gretchen heavy arm. That being said, they can do things like rot shields. You can use them for cheap ways of deploying scramblers, just holding backfield objectives since you don't really want them to be in combat anyways. You can use them to raise banners, hold banners. You can use them to screen. They're great for screening. You can use them to protect your warlord and your other characters by giving them lookouts, sir. I personally prefer boys whenever possible. I've seen lists recently that have been running like 20 Gretchens, 19 Gretchens. I'm not sure why that is. I would actually love any input if you have a list that run like just a single unit of 20 Gretchens. If I had to guess, maybe it's just because they are trying to screen with them, but I myself am not too sure. I always prefer having boys when possible as opposed to Gretchens. But for a list building standpoint, they're really crucial to Orc list building, so that's why I put them in the A tier. Now we got the Orcs only transport option. Before we had the Chinork, but now we have just the Trukk. So the Trukk I would put in between A and B. I really like the Trukk. 10 wounds, toughness 6, at 65 points, extra movement speed. That alone I think is pretty good in terms of point cost. It's very debatable. A lot of people prefer just having extra boys. I'm also experimenting now with having extra boys as well. I'm a little conflicted, to be honest. I'm not too sure whether I would prefer having Trukk, extra boys. The thing with boys is they really benefit from having a lot of numbers due to the fact that if they get plus 20, then they all of the boys get an extra attack. They also benefit from the fact that they can use the number of models in their unit for their leadership. And the fact that the Trukk only holds 12 boys can be a bit of a detriment, because squads of 10 boys are really not that optimal. They're good for holding objectives, they're good for fighting back in some situations, but really 10 boys, they're gonna die to a lot of things. Boys in general and Gretchens in general are very squishy. This is something I'm gonna experiment more with, using Trukks and not using Trukks. I used to use a lot of Trukks in the beginning of the year, found them to be very successful, as if they die, they protect some of your boys that would have died. You can also unload boys on objectives and also use the Trukk to hold objectives yourself. They have a gun and they can do okay in melee. I mean, it's 5+ to hit, but if you're running Death Skulls, they can get a couple of wounds off on some of the weaker units. So that's why I would put Trukk at in between a A and a B tier. When you compare to the other transport options, or specifically Raiders, it would be a B tier. If you put some Mega Nobz in this thing, it can get pretty scary running Mega Nobz in the Trukk. A couple of tips and tricks is if you are to get a Trukk a weapon because you have some spare points, I would definitely do Wrecking Ball, because that makes the Trukk now have a strength 8 weapon, which is pretty big. You're gonna be wounding a lot of things on a 2+ when you're talking about infantry. With the meta, there's a lot of multi-damage weapons that have been introduced due to, I guess, Games Workshop's response to the Death Guard. The Trukk has been kind of falling out of favor. Movement is still very valuable in 9th edition, so for that reason I would put the Trukk in A. The Burna Boy, one of the most controversial units in ninth edition. I would put it in the C. I really like the Burna Boy as a unit. It's such a cool looking model. And I really like the idea of just 5 boys blasting stuff with their flamers. That sounds super cool to me. But gameplay wise, they've been shafted. When you compare it to the other flamers, most flamers are D6. Burna Boys are D3 attacks. And you have to roll once for all of them. So if you roll a D3 and you roll a 1, now you got 5 Burna Boys that have to only have 1 attack each. That's pretty sus to me. That's pretty weak. I don't like that idea. Their range is so low too. It's 8 inches. I mean, in this game, every inch counts, okay? Maybe not in real life, every inch counts, but in Warhammer, you can bet your ass every inch counts. And at 8-inch range, it's just in an awkward position because when you're at 8-inch range, you might as well be going for the charge. So I don't really like that. So Burna Boys, gonna put them in the C tier. I really like the model there. I think one of the coolest models and coolest units fluff wise, but I have used them in a game and they just felt very underwhelming and I just never used them again. I would love to see them go back up to 12-inch range, and I would love to see them drop the roll a D3 for the whole squad thing. I think that's pretty lame, to be honest. If you are going to use Burna Boys, I would highly recommend putting them in a truck. And I think if you're not short on elite slots and you're using Burna Boys, definitely take 2 instead of 2 squads of 5 man. Take that instead of a 1 squad of 10 man, because that way you're going to get less variance on your number of attacks. If you roll a D1, if you roll a 1 attack for a 10-man squad, you're going to feel pretty bad. So definitely have 2 squads in that truck, or however you run them, because that way at least you have a chance of getting more attacks off on the other squad of Burna Boys. One of my favorite units and favorite models of all time, the Kommandos. The Kommandos are badass. They're a cool looking unit. You know, that boss with that cigar, that's just straight up gangsta. All the other models look really cool too. I mean, orks and gas masks? I mean, you thought Imperial Guardsmen with shovels was cool? You don't know nothing about these purple orks. So Kommandos, definitely S tier. Not just for the looks though. Kommandos play very well. You can deep strike them and easily get deployed scramblers, especially in the mid game, like turn 2 or 3, where a lot of the armies have moved up towards the middle of the board. Kommandos are super good. They're super cheap too. You can get a 5-man squad for 45 points. It's actually the cheapest squad of infantry that you can get in the Ork army. So you just plop those bad boys down in the enemy deployment so that you can get your enemies deploy scramblers. Secure your 10 victory points, because the enemy's zone is usually the hardest zone to get deploy scramblers on. They are still kind of squishy. They do get that cover save bonus, but you're probably not going to get that all the time, the cover save bonus. They do have technically better melee than regular boys because they have throat slitters, which means that they are actually getting +1 to, I believe it's a +1 to wound when the enemy is wholly or within a terrain feature. That definitely accounts for something. So Kommandos tend to be well worth their points. Tips and tricks for these guys, like I mentioned before, is really use them to deploy scramblers. And I even like to sometimes hold back one squad of Kommandos for like turn 2 or 3, because usually what I'll do is I'll move my boys up to the front objectives, and then on turn 2 I move those all the way up so that they can get onto the battlefield and start fighting things, being a headache for my opponent. And then I can deep strike the Kommandos straight onto the objective markers that are now empty if need be. So Kommandos, there's a lot of utility in them. They're a really nice unit to have in your list. We got the Mad Dok himself, Mad Dok Grotsnik. He getting a D for Dok, that's for sure, because Mad Dok Grotsnik is just too damn expensive for what he does. Yes, he has cyborg armor. Yes, he can do some funky stuff with fallback and charge, but he's just too expensive. I think most of the time you just want to take a Painboy. Mad Dog is 90 points as opposed to the Painboy 65 points. I think most of the time you want to just take Painboy. So for that reason, Dok Grotsnik unfortunately is a D tier, which sucks because I'm a Death Skulls player. It sucks that our named character sucks. And it's weird that he's an elite slot too. I find that very strange why they didn't make him an HQ. It wouldn't necessarily make him better. I mean, maybe it would because then you can round out your patrol. You can add another patrol group. But I think it's just too expensive. So Mad Dog is gonna be a D tier for me. Mega Nobz. Mega Nobz are some badass boys. I put them strongly at B. I would put them in between A and B. For this review, I'll put them in B tier. I'll explain why. Mega Nobz hit hard when they get into combat, okay? The problem is getting them into combat. They're very, very slow. They're 4-inch movement. And the thing is, a lot of the heavy infantry now, like the Terminators, have like innate 4+ invulnerable saves. That's kind of where the meta shifting. A lot of units have a lot of armor penetration. So when you're dealing with things with armor penetration, especially when you're facing armies with a lot of armor penetration, Mega Nobz tend to do very poorly. They're also not benefiting from lookouts or anything like that, so your opponent can just choose to pick them off from afar. Especially with all of these multi-damage weapons too, Mega Nobz have really, I personally feel like, lost their value. We are seeing some lists recently with more Mega Nobz. If I had to guess, they're using them to hold backfield objectives. If you're using Mega Nobz, I'm very curious as to how you're using them because I really like the model. I mean, Mega Nobz are pretty badass. They're orks in Terminator armor. That's as orky as it gets. It's damn cool. Another thing that is an issue for Mega Nobz is they can really get tar pit easily. Like, if your opponent just throws like 10 Poxwalkers at them, they're going to be stuck for like 2 turns. Also due to the fact that their weapon skill 3, but they're getting -1 to hit. So that really leaves them in an awkward place because now you're hitting on 4s and you're going to have 3 to 4 attacks depending on your loadout. Most of the time you're going to have 2 kill slots, so you're going to have 4 attacks. But 4 attacks hitting at 50%, that's 2 wounds. Given the variance, probably going to miss like in a squad of 3. If you make 8 wounds, you're going to actually inflict 6 wounds. So yeah, you're going to be stuck there with these Mega Nobz in combat. They really shine in taking out vehicles and multi-wound units. So definitely try to get them into combat with that. Another nifty thing too is use the stratagem hit him harder when you're tackling bigger and tougher units that you need to kill, because hit him harder actually gives them +1 damage, which is huge. That +1 damage can really add up. So +1 damage on all of their attacks is a great stratagem to use when you're fighting units that you want to clear and you need to do it on that turn. For those reasons, Mega Nobz, for my review, strongly a B. I find their mobility is the biggest thing, and they can't deep strike like Termies can, so they're going to be a B for me. Moving on to the mech. The mech is pretty trash, not going to lie. Mech is pretty trash. It's very cheap in points. It's 30 points. But its mechanic ability can only heal 1 wound. And the problem with that is that vehicles can only be healed by mechanic ability once per turn. So that means that if you have a big mech and the regular mech side by side, you're gonna just want a big mech to be healing that vehicle because the big mech at least has on average a heal of 2, but the mechanic can only ever heal 1. It does have the option of getting a custom Mega Blaster for 5 points, so you could have a 35-point custom Mega Blaster. That would be great if the custom Mega Blaster that the mech has wasn't 12 inches. If this was a 24-inch custom Mega Blaster, I could see the mechs being used, even though it takes up a full elite slot. But the fact that it only has a 12-inch custom Mega Blaster, like I said, every inch counts, is no good for me. A cool trick that I was reading up on Reddit is to give the mech the redder armor relic. So what that does is that any vehicle that you put it in will actually get +1 movement, and any enemy unit within 1 inch will take a mortal wound on a 4+. Now 1 inch is It's not that big. It's pretty small. 1 inch, you're like gonna be pretty much using that on things that you're in engagement range in pretty much. But if you put it in a bone breaker, I think it will do some cool stuff. If you put the mech with redder armor in a bone breaker, I think that would be an interesting combination. I'm actually thinking about doing that in my next game. The fact that it can only heal 1 wound and its custom Mega Blaster is a custom Mega Slugger and 12 inches instead of 24 is why I would put it in a D tier. The Nobz with Waaagh banner is straight to D tier as well due to the fact that it's gone up so much in points. Maybe we're going to start seeing it back though. Maybe we're going to see it come back because now we're also seeing more boys. More boys means that it's highly likely that we're going to be seeing more units that support the boys. And when you do have a Nobz with Waaagh banners, now you got boys hitting on 2+. That is pretty good. If you ask me, hitting on 2+. Only downside of this is that he costs as much as 10 boys. So really you're gonna have to pick and choose. Do I want to have 10 boys or do I want to have this Nobz with Waaagh banner? If this Nobz with Waaagh banner, let's say, was like 60 points, I think it would be S tier actually if it was 60 points. But at 85 points is a little expensive for what he does. Cool thing that tip and trick you can use for this is that Waaagh banner works on Gretchins and Killicans, but unfortunately Killicans don't see much play due to their points increase in the last FAQ. Oh, the computer telling me to go to sleep. And as I said before, Gretchins are not really doing much with extra hits anyways because most of the time they're going to be wounding on 6s. For those reasons, Nobz with Waaagh banner for me is in the D tier. Moving on to the Nobz, just the regular Nobz. I'm going to put these guys in the C tier. We don't really see them used that competitively, but I feel like Nobz, just like Burna Boyz, have some potential here. We see actually Nobz in patrol games, and they actually do well in patrol games. They are a little overcosted for their stat line, considering that when you get a regular Nobz from a boy squad, it costs 8 points, but in the Nobz group, it's 17 points. Now, it does get a 4+ armor save, but like I said right now, so many units in the game have armor penetration. So, honestly, I feel like nowadays, the only thing that matters is invulnerable save because of all the armor penetration. That being said, 4+ sorry, not invuln, but 4+ regular save, definitely nothing to scoff at. So I don't know. Maybe with some points decrease, we'll see more Nobz being played. I think that Nobz in a Trukk is interesting. It is pretty expensive to put a squad of Nobz in a Trukk. It's gonna be like almost 230 points to have a bunch of Nobz in a Trukk, but that might be a better use of the Trukk than the boys. Who knows? Definitely something to consider and definitely something to experiment with is the Nobz. Maybe we'll see some more Nobz as the new Codex comes out. But for now, I would put the Nobz as a C tier. Tips and tricks, like I said, they do well in patrol lists. But realistically, I would way rather have a lot of boys than the Nobz. Painboy. Painboy is for me a solid B tier unit. It costs 65 points, comes with well actually it comes with a power claw, so it has decent melee. Can heal some of the Nobz that are maybe in your boy squad or bikers if you're running bikers, which we don't see a lot of, but I've seen a couple of lists here and there with bikers. So it's cheap enough that it can pay for itself. From a math hammer perspective, a Painboy pays for itself when it's around 60 boys. So if you got 2 squads of 30, then math hammer speaking, the Painboy will make up for its unit cost. Also, you should note that the Painboy can heal Ghazghkull. So if you're running a Ghazghkull, because Ghazghkull can only lose 4 wounds per phase, and if you just the way that the games usually roll out on turn 1, you're not really going to get charged. So Gaz is very durable. Now the fact that you can heal him, even though it's D3 wounds, so there's a bit of variance in the healing, it could lead to some interesting things. I mean, keeping Gaz around for even 1 extra turn could be extremely devastating because Gaz is just such a powerful unit. For that reason, I really like the Painboy. We're seeing it more and more as we see more boys focus lists. So for that reason, I'm gonna put it as a strong B tier unit. I would even put it before Mega Nobz. And hey, it could heal Mega Nobz too. Oh, the Runtherd. This is definitely a D tier unit. Man, Runtherd is just like it costs almost as much as 10 Gretchin, and like I said before, Gretchin are only A tier for the purpose of building lists. I don't see Gretchins doing much in combat, so for that reason, I don't think the Runtherd is really that valuable. Yes, it can give rerolls of wounds of 1 to the Grots, but mathematically speaking, that is not that good. That's only a 6% increase in their chance to wound. Unless you're taking like 100 Grots, which, listen, I'm not the type of player to say that something is bad forever or that, things in D tier. Oh, never play a unit in D tier because of D tier. No, in fact, you should often be testing units that are considered bad because those are the things that shift the meta and they can give you a competitive edge over the other players. Me personally, though, I just don't think it's worth the points. I think you would just rather pay 10 points and have 10 extra Gretchin than have a Runtherd. The Runtherd doesn't take a detachment. It's essentially you just pay 40 points for it. For me, I put it as a D tier, and we don't see it at all in competitive play. Actually, the Runtherd. Last but not least, Tankbustas. I like Tankbustas. They're a cool unit. I think they're good. I like Tankbustas. I put them at B just because they are a little situational. Not everybody's running vehicles, and against non-vehicles they don't do very well. But against vehicles, they reroll to hit. They have 8 strength. They got Daka Daka. If you're running Death Skulls, you got the reroll 1 to hit, reroll 1 to wound. Each of them have a tank buster. Sorry, not a tank. Is it a tank buster launcher? They have a rocket launcher, which is 8 strength. I believe minus 3 AP, 3 damage. Don't quote me on that. That's a lot of numbers. I personally really like the models. I think they look super cool. I think they look badass. You got the one dude with the fistful of rockets. You got the little squigs. Those squigs and stuff are cool, but if you're gonna take this thing to like a tournament, I don't really think that the squigs are worthwhile for their points. I think you would rather just have more tank busters or just have more boys. Everything in orks comes down to, do I want this or do I want more boys? So definitely something to keep in mind. But tank busters I think are really cool. I guess my tip and trick would just be just give them rocket launches, take a knob, and I would definitely put them in a truck. I will put them in a transport because they are very squishy too. One of the things that is a problem with a lot of orc elite units is that they're often very squishy. So aim with tank busters. So that's why I put the truck in the A tier because a lot of units benefit from the truck like Mega Nobz, tank busters because the truck is open topped. You can shoot stuff outside of the truck, which is very, very valuable. The truck basically becomes like a little shield for your units. That's it for all the troops and elites. Essentially, when you're coming to pick troops and elites, a lot of the brain power is in, do I want these units or do I want more boys? But if you're running a buggy list, you would be thinking, do I want this unit or do I want more buggies? And that's where a lot of the conflict happens. I definitely don't think my tier list is set in gold. I put the S tier and the A tier units where they are because we see these units a lot in competitive play. But really, even the truck you could debatably put in B tier because it's not used competitively a lot. I've just personally had a lot of success with it in my games with my friends. Units in the D tier in a competitive setting, I would probably not use it. Only thing I would consider is the knob with the Waaagh banner. I would maybe put it in the C tier category. But I think that I would rather have 10 extra boys than this unit here, so I put it in the D tier. I hope that this has helped you guys. If you have feedback or input, I would really, really love to hear it because I myself am not a veteran of this game. I'm just really coming into it for the start of the pandemic. So leave your comments and suggestions below. Thanks for watching the video. If you found value in it, I would really appreciate a sub and a like. Other than that, you guys stay safe out there and stay tuned for the upcoming videos where I plan to cover all of the fast attack, all of the heavy support, and even the Forge World models.